and welcome back to Kapow. It's been 2 weeks since the event, and if any of my friends or family are still alive, then hi, I guess. For anyone else, I'm Sonya.
And I'm Al. It certainly hasn't been easy since the event, that's for sure. Between the natural disasters, the zombies, and the crazed parties of hungry survivors, it's important to keep your spirits up. That's why it's good we've taken shelter here in King's Comics, where there's plenty to read.
No food, though.
Yeah, I didn't say it was a perfect plan, just that it was a plan.
Yeah, okay, but, it is great because, we can do some reviews to keep up survivor morale.
So today we'll be checking out Wild Blue Yonder, issue 1 of Suiciders, and the hardcover of Mad Max Fury Road inspired artists.
Ray has once again returned from a food raid with anime instead of food, so we'll be reviewing Akira.
Then I'll be talking with fellow survivor and writer for one of the new Mad Max movies prequel comics, Mark Sexton.
Most importantly though, we'll be sharing our thoughts on Mad Max Fury Road.
But before we start that, you'll have to give us a second because, some aliens just landed outside.
Again.
Yeah, so what do you think? Same plan?
Yeah, go up on the roof and throw pop vinyls at them till they go away. Yeah, okay. Back in a minute, guys. I tend to think that when the apocalypse does come, we're going to be really well prepared due to the decades we've spent making up elaborate stories about it.
Well, that's true. Whether it's a viral outbreak or the rapture or a tornado full of sharks. Yeah. We spent a lot of time on post-apocalyptic dystopia, and I think it's partly because it's human nature to consider our own mortality and by extension, to consider the potential transience of our society.
Oh, yeah, there's that, but it's also really cool to shoot zombies in radioactive wastelands.
That's true, and in that vein, we've decided to take a look at a few books which consider what life might be like after we've been knocked back to square one.
Wild Blue Yonder is written by Mike Recht, with art by Zach Howard, and starts with a familiar premise of mankind having rendered our world all but unlivable thanks to pollution and radiation. And now, the only option left in a world ravaged by death is to rise above it. Quite literally.
Mankind's hopes now rest entirely on the massive skyships that soar above the polluted Earth, although these ships are still dependent on the fuel mined by poor unfortunates still living below.
With the exception of the Dawn, the only skyship running on solar energy, able to fly forever without needing to refuel, making her a target for every survivor in the sky.
Which gives rise to the most powerful element in this book for me, the dogfights. Not enough that there is amazing plane versus plane battle, there are also warriors with jetpacks rocketeering their way through the action, which is every flavour of cool.
The splash pages of combat are fantastic, but I also felt that the character building was beautifully handled. Every member of the Dawn's crew are instantly endearing, and you even find yourself empathising with the bad guys. After all, they're just trying to survive. There's a real sense of humanity and hope present in this one, which I often find is quite absent from dystopian stories. I really loved this book and I'm giving it a massive buy.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a fresh take on the world after the fall. And for all you steampunk fans out there are goggles and oversized gloves aplenty. It's definitely a buy from me as well.
Next up, we have issue 1 of a recent Vertigo title, Suiciders, written and penciled by Lee Bermejo with colours by Matt Hollingsworth. Bringing us into the story 30 years after a massive earthquake has decimated Los Angeles, Suiciders is a true dystopian story.
It is very much about the dark side of human nature, that's for sure. In order to survive after the Big One tore it apart, the city has been walled off and separated into New Angeles and Lost Angeles, with the lower classes living in poverty while the privileged few indulge themselves with genetic modifications and a brutal blood sport known as suicide.
Our central figure is a suicider known as the Saint, a genetically enhanced gladiator who has become a huge celebrity for the citizens of New Angeles. His background and motivations are kept quite shadowy. It would have been nice if there was a bit more revealed about the characters in general, but this first issue is just about setting up the world.
Visually though, we're told quite a lot. Hollingsworth also does excellent work on the colours, the city awash with shades of blue and orange. I think the series shows a lot of promise. I'm going to give it a buy.
Although I did enjoy it, I feel the lack of character development kind of holds me back a little bit. And the idea isn't that original. I have seen other things that follow the same lines. It does look great, and I'm sure the characters will grow as the series continues, so I am going to give it a borrow.
Finally, we come to Mad Max Fury Road inspired artists, a collection of artwork from 65 different artists inspired by the new Mad Max movie. Although you probably guessed that from the title.
Yeah, okay, the title isn't that imaginative, but there is imagination aplenty within its pages. There's an incredibly distinctive style to the world of Mad Max, and it's amazing to see it interpreted by so many different artists.
You wouldn't think there were so many different ways to approach it, would you? You think it'll just be brown desert behind grey machine parts. But when you're dealing with artists as diverse as Dave McKean, Paul Pope, and Australia's own Ben Templesmith and Nicola Scott, the sky really is the limit.
But beyond recognising some of your favourite artists in this book, it's great to see some emerging talent as well. There's everything from insane action moments to heart-wrenching character portraits, and they're all just stunning. This is a huge buy from me.
Well, I'm going to give it a borrow. Not that it isn't great, but art collections aren't really my thing. With every new image, I just wanted to get into what the story behind it was, which did amp me up for the movie, but felt somehow limited.
See, I felt the opposite. I mean, often I find comic tie-ins to movies fall a little bit flat, so it was nice to come across something a bit different. This is a great accompaniment to Fury Road, and you should check it out. Your job was to source food.
But the anime was on sale.
Well, how did you pay for it?
Well, I left a couple of cans of tuna and an old bread roll on the counter. Oh, hey guys, when you think post-apocalyptic anime, there's a fair few titles to choose from. Now, if you want a TV series, I reckon take a look at a title called Ergo Proxy. But if you want something a little less known, take a look at Now and Then, Here and There.
Yeah, okay, you're stalling now, enough. I can tell you're excited about this.
She's right, I am. I couldn't go past one of the most influential animes of all time. Akira. In 1988, an explosion destroys Tokyo, which instigates World War III. 31 years later, Neo-Tokyo is in a state of military rule against revolutionary forces who fight for economic and political change. Amidst the unfolding upheaval, two rival motorcycle gangs go head-to-head on the street. One of the gang members, Tetsuo, has a near collision with an escaped secret military experiment called an Esper. Tetsuo is abducted and taken to hospital, where the military begins testing him as an Esper. His abilities develop quickly, and he breaks out of captivity in search for the omnipotent and imprisoned Esper named Akira. However, Tetsuo's power proves to be so volatile that everyone joins forces to prevent him from destroying the world.
It's awesome. It's such an iconic film, and it's been such a great influence on a lot of sci-fi films.
Yeah, and it's based on a manga of the same name by Katsuhiro Otomo, but the manga spans over a larger time frame. Now, Otomo only agreed to the adaptation providing that he retained creative control. So, the story, the film, though condensed, hasn't suffered.
It looks fantastic, even by today's standards.
Absolutely. Well, they did throw nearly $500,000 at it in 1988. And they also revolutionized the animation process by pre-recording dialogue and then animating the mouths around that muscularity. They also animated body and facial movement at the same time as the dialogue to create a greater fluidity and reality. And the final cut contains over 160,000 animation cells.
The art direction is superb.
Oh, without a doubt. It's an amazing anime, and the art is incredibly realised. It's visceral, and the film also marks Otomo's transition into working almost exclusively in anime for TV and film.
Cool. So what about the characters?
I love that Kaneda is a rebel-like anti-hero, and also how part of me wants to help Tetsuo despite his destructive actions. Even Kaneda's love interest, Kei, commits questionable acts. Those of the military and the politicians too all seem to have some sort of moral code, even if their interests are corrupt or selfish. So the characters are three-dimensional, each with faults and flaws and redeeming qualities. And there's a sense of cool about the characters as well, because it has a cyberpunk tone to it. I always found it interesting that the poster child is Kaneda, and yet we follow the story of Tetsuo and his growth, but the film is called Akira. Anyway, what did you think about the story, Sonya?
Well, it's solid, even though it's not conventional, and it certainly doesn't spoon feed you, so thinking caps on, people. The clues are kind of released in snippets, and they're not necessarily in linear succession.
No, in that sense, it's kind of impressionistic, you could say. Which is something I love about the film. The story doesn't necessarily provide answers, but proposes questions about the role of humanity and the use of power. I remember having to watch it a couple of times when I was young to grasp the huge ideas present in the film, but after watching it again, some of it still remains ambiguous. That said, I think that today's audience are better equipped to deal with the structure and the content, given that they've been more exposed to unconventional storytelling techniques and concepts that weren't so prevalent 15 or so years ago.
Yeah, if you haven't seen Akira yet, then you really must. It's a cornerstone in the anime kingdom and a really fine film in its own right. I'm definitely giving it a buy.
Well said, yeah, and I think you'll also get a kick out of the soundtrack because there's an awesome injection of these wonderful soundscapes and sound effects, and there's a couple of tracks that blend this tribal chanting with these ethereal harmonies. It sounds awesome, so I'm giving it a buy as well.
Awesome. Now that that's done, can we go and get our food back?
We can't, there's no refunds on sale items.
How did you survive?
Survive what?
Don't go outside, Ray.
Survive what?
It's fine. Everything is fine.
Today we have Mark Sexton joining us, one of the creators behind the new Mad Max Fury Road prequel comic. Thank you for coming along.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Oh, not at all. Very nice to have you here. Now, you've had a very storied past between comics and movies. Tell us a bit about your background, your starting point in comics.
Started doing comics back in 1993. No one will remember that.
You might be surprised.
Doing a couple of comic series down in Melbourne, a comic book called Bug and Stump, which was a lot of fun, and a comic book for the band Tizen, which some people may remember, which got us magnificently banned.
Yes.
For various reasons, which I won't go into.
Rubbed some people up the wrong way for maybe not understanding what you were trying to do, I think. Yeah.
That's the way of the artist.
Of course.
Anyway.
Such suffering.
And yes, terrible suffering. And then didn't do any comics for about 20 years. But got into film the same week as I got banned.
Right. Okay. So a clear transition. You got poached over to the other side. How did that come about?
Ironically enough, the director Alex Proyas, who was doing Dark City at the time, had broken his previous storyboard artist and needed a new one to break. And he tended to use comic book artists because they didn't know the rules of film.
Right. So you get away with practically everything.
And because they hadn't done storyboarding, so they were harder to break.
Right.
So he chose me to break.
Fantastic.
Which took a few years, but he got there.
And this was with Dark City?
Dark City,
yep.
And then did that, which was a lot of fun. And then moved on to work with George Miller on Babe 2, which some of you may have seen. Worked there for a while. Went off and did some other films, which no one definitely ever saw, and very wisely so. And then came back and got asked to come in and, oddly enough, do some storyboards for Happy Feet back in 1999. Walked into the room where George was, and he said, "Oh, Mark, do you want to do some Mad Max storyboards?" I was like, Penguins, Happy Feet, Mad Max. Yeah.
Pretty clear choice, I think.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. Have you been a long-term fan of Mad Max?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, like everybody. Well, it came out when I was... Mad Max 1 came out when I was 9, I think. I didn't see that one, but I saw Mad Max 2. That was a Freudian slip. Mad Max 2 at first time at a 12-year-old birthday party.
Oh, okay.
Which is appropriate, it being an R-rated film.
Sure, yeah, great parenting decisions being made.
Yeah. Well, this is the 1980s. And yes, it was an interesting experience because we had 20 very, very sugared-up, psychotic small boys running around a small flat, screaming, yelling. The movie came on, they all shut up, sat down, and just went...
I can imagine. Yeah, completely captivated. There you go.
That cemented my my love of Mad Max.
Yeah, and you've continued on with loving the series as it went on, or did it peak there until recently, of course?
I think everybody has mixed feelings about Thunderdome.
Yeah, I would say that's fair. Yeah,
it's kind of backwards, that film, but anyway. And coming back to do Fury Road was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'll bet.
2 years in a room with George storyboarding, which was also interesting.
Yes, I bet.
In a good
interesting.
way. And very educational.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, you've moved on from this. You've got the prequel comics coming out. Now, how did this come about, sort of growing out of the movie?
Oh, it was literally probably the week that I finished doing the storyboards. We had three of us storyboarding the film. There was Brendan McCarthy, who was co-writing as well, and Brendan McCarthy was a seminal British comic book artist from the 1980s who did a lot of stuff for 2000 AD. He's a really, really interesting guy to work with and an absolute visionary when it comes to conceptualisation of things.
Right.
And we had Peter Pound, who was an Australian comic book artist who has a very interesting, very alternative style, but it's very interesting, and he's great at cars, and he's a complete Mad Max nut. And me. And we all storyboarded in this room for 2 years. We all talked about doing Mad Max comics.
Yeah.
And then at some point, everybody else went off and did other projects, and it was just me and George in the room. And the week that I finished, I said, "So, George, can we play and do some Mad Max comics?" And George went, might be good. I'll think about it. And he thought about it for 12 years.
So gave it good consideration, obviously.
I hope so. And then decided, he rang me August last year and said, I think I'd like to do some Mad Max comics.
Right.
And I was like, oh.
And had you completely forgotten about the idea by that point?
Might have reminded him a few times.
Right, yeah, I'll bet.
Like every week. Yes, so I dropped everything I was doing and rushed over and started doing comics for George, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And of course it turned out that it was, because it's a Warner Brothers film, it's been done through DC and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, kind of went from doing no comic books at all to doing a DC series quite quickly, which is interesting.
I mean, you've said yourself you love Mad Max. Australia loves Mad Max. Why do you think he's become such a sort of a cultural touchstone, an icon for Australia?
Well, I think he's more a global touchstone, a global icon, because he's one of those universal. He's a universal character. He's he is Australian in terms of when the film was done, the people who were in it, the production values and stuff like that. And I think it's that gives it a very, very unique flavour. But it's a very, very, very primal, very simple story about a man who is totally ordinary, trapped in an extraordinary situation where he's made one bad decision in his past, which was to get revenge, which is obviously what the first film was about. And he's been trapped by that choice. And he's been trying to escape it ever since. And that makes it a very universal story. A man who's trapped by his past. Is not Australian, it's a global idea.
Sure.
And so I think it translates everywhere. And I mean, Mad Max over the last, 35 years, or God, however long it's been around there, has got a massive worldwide following. I mean, it's huge in Japan, it's huge in France, it's huge in every country around the world. It's bonkers. So.
Well, he's an everyman. He's not a guy. He's not your highly trained Navy SEAL. He's he doesn't have superpowers. He's just a regular man. I think
he was a rev head who just happened to be a cop.
Exactly. Yeah. And he's you can empathise with him because of that, I think.
Yeah, totally. No superpowers. Just, as I said, a man who was made one bad decision, and then the apocalypse happened, which wasn't his fault.
Sure, yeah. But nonetheless, it sort of locked him in. Yeah. Now, it's very exciting. We've got the movie coming out. We've got the prequel comics coming out. Where are people going to be able to lay their hands on these comics?
I think if you look around certain stores like this one here, comic stores, and specialty bookstores, I'm sure we'll be able to find them there. There's 4 issues coming out, one every month for the next 4 months. And then there's a trade paperback coming out in September, I think, which is going to have the collected stories and also another new story that the other storyboard artist from the film, Peter Pound, is going to be drawing, which we haven't written yet.
Right.
Hello, Alex, my lovely editor. I haven't written it yet. It's going to happen.
Well, we'll be kicking him off home to get that done any moment now.
I hope he's not watching this. So, yes, we've got that to do, but I think it'll be an interesting little package.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, it's an interesting series because we're trying to tie them all together, and we're also trying to tie the previous 3 films in as well. So just trying to give some sort of idea as to what was happening throughout those films.
Okay.
So that's been an interesting challenge.
I'll bet. Yeah.
So it'll be fun.
Well, that's certainly something to look forward to.
Hope so.
Thank you so much for coming along.
That's good. Thank you for having me.
Not at all.
Hey guys, we're here to see Mad Max Fury Road. Sonya,
Yep.
what do you expect?
Explosions. Lots and lots of explosions.
All right, Al?
Yeah, I'm expecting probably at least 1 or 2 dodgy Australian accents and enough cars blown up, torn to shreds to fill an entire junkyard.
Okay. I'm expecting madness.
From the title, it's a good bet.
Yeah, well, you know.
That's fair.
Possibly some fury as well.
I like to play it safe. Yeah, all right, let's go.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Want to get through this? Let's go!
All right, we've just seen Mad Max Fury Road. Holy doolies.
Yeah.
Sonya, your thoughts first?
Okay, I'm very bombarded by this film. It's hard to get my head to work properly, but overall, like, visually, I knew going into this that it was going to look amazing because it's Mad Max, it's crazy machines, it's a lot of action, and it absolutely delivers on that. The action scenes in this are quite phenomenal. Also knowing how much is actually human and not CGI. Like, the stunt guys on this must have had an absolute ball doing all of this stuff. And knowing that a lot of the actors were put into those situations that are, like, seriously dangerous. It's pretty cool. There's been a lot of talk about the female element of Mad Max, and I gotta say, I think it was handled so well. Eve Ensler obviously was brought on to work with the women, and I think that shows, like, she was a great activist for women who suffer from domestic abuse and violence by the hands of men, and it shows, like, the women don't have a lot to say in this, but I don't know, their performances were really well nuanced. Charlize Theron was amazing as Furiosa, this crazy, flawed, mental head case of a woman who just desperately needs to escape, takes the women, like...
Yeah, great character.
Was brilliant character. But yeah, like, I just feel very bombarded by the film. It's intense. It's very intense.
All right. Al?
Well, yeah, I think that's intense is the word. It's absolutely the word to describe this film. And it is from very early on, you see what you're going to get into. From the first frames, you're seeing exactly how nuts it's going to be, which is very cool. You see immediately what you're going to be getting into, and it doesn't let up the entire film. It does not let up. There's maybe a couple of quiet moments, but primarily it just keeps going, bombarding you. I'm exhausted. I walked out of there on weak legs. I was wobbly. I needed to lie down. I mean,
A snooze would be good.
the downside of this, and it's only a small one, is there's maybe not that much narrative.
No.
Not that much actually happens. It is basically an hour and a half long action scene.
Yep.
It's an amazing action scene. It really is quite amazing how it's all been put together. As you say, with so little digital effects and stuff like that, it's amazing what they've accomplished with what they were doing here. But yeah, there are a couple of quiet moments where they do try to put some narrative, and sometimes they felt like they were clanging a little bit. The music, emotional music soared up, and I was kind of
lay off.
Yeah, let's just get back to the cars. That's what you're solid with. So I don't want to say that there's not arcs for the characters. As you say, there's some really good characters in here, and they do have a character arc. They do have a journey, and you see that if you look for it. So overall, it's an amazing achievement.
Yeah, look, it is. It feels almost as though this is the post-apocalyptic vision that Miller really wanted to have at the time. It was always after, because the capturing that world, the design element is amazing. It's wonderful. The characters are really great. There's a comic element to them as well, which is really nice to see. Wonderfully violent, but not in a hugely grotesque way either, which is really nice.
Those chuckle moments where something violent but kind of funny kind of kicked up. You went, oh, that's hilarious and gross at the same time. And I thought it was still done more or less tastefully. Yeah,
it was. And the soundtrack I thought was pretty amazing. It's non-stop as well, like the action. It just keeps going. So
when you drive around with a truck full of drummers on the back, you're going to have some goodness going on.
Right,
I liked that. I liked this whole, he just takes his band with him on the road.
The accompaniment,
that was very cool, and that's something that I've never come across something like that before. That's amazing.
There was something oddly Australian about that, wasn't there? That you've got a truck, let's chuck some drums
Yeah.
and a bloke with an electric guitar
Yeah.
that shoots flame.
Yeah.
There's something very Australian about that, and I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So are we glad Max is back?
Yes,
Yeah?
I think so. Yeah. I was young when Mad Max first kind of hit the cinema, so
Yeah.
I have to say he didn't have a huge impact on my life.
Yeah.
But it's nice to have such an iconic Aussie character back. I
Yeah.
think that's very cool. We've been missing that, so
Yeah.
I think that's cool.
All right, awesome. Al?
Yeah, look, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing for Australia. I think he's a worldwide icon.
Yeah.
You know, he's something that everybody sees something in this guy that they can relate to.
Yeah.
And I think that it's great that that's coming out of Australia. That we've got this everyman coming out of here.
Yeah, I think the same. What about Tom Hardy as Max himself? You know, how did you think he, weighed up against Gibson's Max?
That's really hard. That's really hard. Look, half the time I was watching Tom Hardy going, what are you doing, man? Like, what? I think he says maybe 5 whole sentences in the whole film, and the rest is just kind of half-muttered things and grunts and...
That's typically Australian, isn't
Well,
it?
I don't know whether it's because Tom Hardy maybe can't do an Aussie accent, so they just decided not to give him words. But for me, I actually don't think that worked as well. I think Mel will always be Mad Max until somebody can take that throne, I'm afraid.
Okay. Al?
Yeah, I've got to pretty much agree. It was an odd performance by Hardy. It was very odd. I wasn't sure what he was doing. He kind of often came across as maybe he's a bit simple, or maybe he just doesn't speak English very well. That was the way he was delivering his lines, like somebody who didn't actually speak the language very well.
Right.
Luckily, as I say, it's an hour and a half long action scene, so he didn't have any soliloquies in there, so that's fine. Didn't really detract from the film.
Funnily enough, I really liked Tom Hardy's performance. Yeah, that simple kind of aspect to it, I felt he was sort of almost calling upon some kind of animalistic quality. Yeah, so his actions always on instinct and things like that, but in terms of actually grasping with any kind of dialogue or thought processes, he can't really do it. And I thought that he tried to grasp some kind of continuity from Mel's Max with the wild sort of eyes and the, I thought he tried to try and blend something and also create his own character. But there was some moments I was like, whoa, that's an odd choice. Why is that, why are we going down that road?
I mean, they were really going with the idea of him having been a bit mentally fractured by what he's experienced up till now. He's got his regrets, he's got his guilt that's kind of just messed with him a bit, and that maybe that's what he was pushing for. It's just occasionally it came across as kind of some odd choices. Yeah.
Well, what do you think about this in terms of an injection into Australian film? It's action packed, and it's a very different kind of film. It's sort of like a big rock opera. So, do you think this is the film that the Australian film industry has been looking for?
Absolutely.
Yep.
I think it is. I mean, Aussie films tend to have a bit of a reputation of being quiet films, or films about criminals, or films about family drama.
Yep.
So it's really nice to show that, hey, we can actually do massive, blockbuster, epic stuff as well.
Yep.
We have amazing talent in this country that, Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron, obviously not Aussies, but...
That's all right.
The team behind this film, the stunt guys,
guys,
everyone who helps make a film a whole film, remember there's a lot of people involved in this, are Aussies. We've got great talent here, and I think Mad Max kind of goes to show that we can hold it with the big boys in this. We're really good at this.
Yeah, cool. Absolutely. Al?
Couldn't agree more. I mean, this is a genre film. This is a massive blockbuster action genre film that isn't about being Australian.
Yeah.
And I think that's the step forward. You don't see other countries doing films that this is a film about being English, or this is about being American. Australian films often are about being Australian, and I think this steps outside of that. This just makes an amazing film that rivals any action film that's come out in the last 5 years. In terms of the choreography, in terms of the action, this rivals any of them, and I think that's a fantastic step forward for the Australian industry.
Yeah, absolutely. You said it right when you said about genre. I think it's something that's severely lacking in Australian cinema. We need more of it. We need to, as I said, just make the film, just tell the story, and we can do that easily. So, well, that's our thoughts. Let us know what you think of Mad Max Fury Road.
Well, that's about all the electricity we have for now, and we are working on a generator involving a treadmill, a hungry rodent, and a sandwich I found behind the counter.
We have a sandwich?
It's more green fuzz than sandwich, man. Don't get excited.
Okay. Well, guys, we'll be back as soon as we can with more Kapow, provided we haven't resorted to cannibalism by that point or been overrun by the giant mutated insects.
I, for one, welcome our new insect overlords.
So until next time, guys, keep your spirits up and for God's sake, stay away from the windows. Bye.
Bye.